The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the Cascades, carrying the faint cry of a man in pain. Sarah Coleman froze mid-step on the rocky trail, her hiking boots crunching against the gravel. She was no stranger to these mountains. She'd been guiding tourists through Washington's wilderness for a decade, but that sound, raw and desperate, pierced her heart like a shard of ice. Dropping her pack, she scanned the horizon, her breath visible in the crisp autumn air. Somewhere out there, someone needed her. She didn't hesitate. She never did. Sarah was 34, with sun-bleached hair tied in a messy bun and eyes that held the steady calm of someone who'd faced nature's fury and come out stronger. She wasn't just a hiking guide, she was a lifeline for those who underestimated the wild. Her job at Peak Pulse Adventures paid barely enough to cover her rent in the small town of Leavenworth, but it gave her purpose. Leading groups through the trails, teaching them to respect the land, watching their faces light up at a sunrise over the peaks, that was her calling. Or so she thought, until that October morning when everything changed. The cry came again, weaker now, from a ravine below the trail. Sarah grabbed her first aid kit and rappelled down the steep incline, her gloved hands gripping the rope. At the bottom, she found him, a hiker, mid-20s, sprawled on the rocks, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. Blood seeped through his torn pants, and his face was pale, lips trembling. "Help," he whispered, barely audible. His name, she'd learn later, was Ethan, a college student from Seattle who'd ventured out alone, unprepared for the terrain. Sarah's training kicked in. She splinted his leg with branches and duct tape, wrapped him in her emergency blanket, and radioed for help. The nearest ranger station was an hour away, and a storm was rolling in. Ethan was slipping in and out of consciousness, his pulse weak. She knew waiting wasn't an option. With no cell signal and her group of tourists expecting her back at camp, Sarah made a choice. She hoisted Ethan onto her back, his weight crushing her shoulders, and began the grueling climb back to the trail. Every step was a battle. Her muscles screamed, her lungs burned, and the wind whipped her face with icy needles. She thought of her dad, a firefighter who died saving a family from a burning house when she was 12. "Kindness costs," he told her once, "but it's the only currency that matters." Those words fueled her now, pushing her forward as she carried Ethan to safety. Hours later, she reached a clearing where a medevac helicopter could land. As the chopper's blades roared, paramedics took Ethan, and Sarah collapsed, exhausted but relieved. He'd live. She expected a pat on the back when she returned to Peak Pulse's office that evening, her clothes still caked with dirt and blood. Instead, her boss, Greg, was waiting, his face a mask of disapproval. "You abandoned your group, Sarah," he said, arms crossed. "They waited for hours, no guide, no explanation. 2 of them are threatening to sue." Sarah tried to explain, Ethan, the ravine, the storm, but Greg cut her off. "You broke protocol. You're done." Just like that, her job, her purpose, was gone. She walked out into the cold night, the weight of the day heavier than Ethan had ever been. Sarah's tiny apartment felt emptier that night. She sat on her worn couch, staring at a photo of her dad in his firefighter's gear, his grin wide and fearless. She'd followed in his footsteps, not with a badge but with a backpack, always putting others first. Now, she had nothing to show for it, no job, no savings, just a nagging question: was kindness really worth it? She fell asleep with that thought, the ache in her heart worse than any bruise from the trail. The next morning, Sarah woke to a strange sound, a low, rhythmic thumping that shook her windows. She stumbled to her porch, still in her flannel pajamas, and froze. 2 helicopters hovered above her street, their blades slicing the air. One was a sleek black model, the kind she'd seen in movies, and the other bore the logo of a local news station. Her neighbors were spilling out of their homes, pointing skyward, their phones recording the spectacle. Sarah's stomach churned. What was this? Had she broken some law saving Ethan? Was she in trouble? Before she could process it, a black SUV pulled up, and a man in a crisp suit stepped out. He was tall, with silver hair and a warm smile that didn't match the intensity of the scene. Sarah Coleman, he asked, extending a hand. I'm Richard Hale. I'd like a word. Bewildered, Sarah followed him to her porch, where he sat as if helicopters were a normal Tuesday morning occurrence. The news chopper circled lower, a camera lens glinting in the sunlight. Ethan's my son, Richard began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. He told me what you did, how you carried him, risked your life, lost your job. He's alive because of you. Sarah blinked, her throat tight. She hadn't expected this. Richard leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. I run Hale Industries, a tech company in Seattle. I've spent my life building things, but yesterday, you reminded me what really matters. I'm here to thank you, and to make things right. Sarah shook her head, embarrassed. I was just doing my job. Richard chuckled softly. A job you no longer have because of my son. Ethan told me everything, Sarah. And I did some digging. He pulled out a tablet and showed her a news article from that morning, its headline bold, Hero Hiker Fired After Saving Student's Life. The story had gone viral, shared thousands of times on social media. Strangers were calling her a hero, demanding Peak Pulse reinstate her. Sarah's cheeks flushed. She wasn't used to attention, let alone praise. That's not all, Richard said, his smile widening. I spoke to your former boss. Let's just say he's reconsidering his decision after some pressure. Sarah's eyes widened. You didn't have to, Richard raised a hand. I did. But I'm not done. I want to fund a new venture for you, a guiding company, your own. You call the shots, hire who you want, teach people to love these mountains like you do. I'll cover the startup costs, no strings attached. Sarah's breath caught. Her own company. It was a dream she'd never dared to voice, not when she was scraping by paycheck to paycheck. She thought of her dad again, how he believed in doing good without expecting reward. This felt too big, too unreal. Why me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Richard's gaze softened. Because you didn't hesitate. You saw someone in need and acted, no matter the cost. That's rare, Sarah. The world needs more of you. Before she could respond, the news chopper landed in a nearby field, and a reporter jogged toward them, microphone in hand. Sarah Coleman, the woman called, her cameraman trailing behind. I'm Lisa Chen with Channel 7. Can we get your story? Sarah froze, but Richard squeezed her shoulder. You've got this, he said. And somehow, she did. She told Lisa about the hike, Ethan, the ravine, not to boast, but to explain why she'd done it. It's what anyone would do, she said, though deep down, she wasn't sure that was true. The interview aired that night, and Sarah's phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, strangers, even her high school gym teacher sent messages of support. A crowdfunding campaign started by Ethan's classmates raised thousands to help her get back on her feet. Peak Pulse issued a public apology, offering her job back, but Sarah declined. Richard's offer had lit a spark in her, a vision of something bigger. She spent the next week meeting with him, sketching plans for Coleman Trails, a guiding company focused on safety, community, and teaching kids from underserved areas to explore the outdoors, but the real turning point came a month later, at the launch of Coleman Trails. Sarah stood in a meadow near Leavenworth, surrounded by her new team, former colleagues who'd quit Peak Pulse to join her, plus a few young guides she'd mentored. Ethan was there, on crutches, his grin wide as he thanked her again. Richard had flown in from Seattle, and a small crowd of locals and reporters gathered, drawn by Sarah's story. She'd expected a quiet ribbon cutting, but what she saw brought tears to her eyes. Dozens of hikers lined the meadow, each holding a sign, "Thank you, Sarah." They were people she'd guided over the years, families, solo travelers, even a grumpy retiree she'd once coaxed down a tricky slope. One by one, they shared stories of how she'd touched their lives, the couple who'd found courage to face their fears on a climb, the teenager who'd discovered a love for nature, the widower who'd found solace in the mountains after loss. Sarah had never realized how many ripples her kindness had created. As the sun dipped behind the peaks, Sarah took the microphone, her voice trembling. "I used to think kindness was a cost," she said, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "My dad taught me it's a choice, one you make even when it's hard. But today, you've shown me it's also a gift, one that comes back to you in ways you never expect." She paused, tears spilling down her cheeks. "This company isn't just mine. It's ours. It's for everyone who believes one act of courage can change everything." The crowd erupted in applause, and Ethan hobbled forward, handing her a small plaque engraved with her dad's words, "Kindness costs, but it's the only currency that matters." Sarah clutched it to her chest, the weight of the moment overwhelming. She'd lost her job, but she'd gained something far greater, a community, a purpose, a legacy. That night, as stars glittered over the Cascades, Sarah stood alone on her porch, the plaque still in her hands. She thought of the helicopters, the headlines, the strangers who'd rallied for her. Kindness had cost her, yes, but it had also carried her here, to a life she'd never imagined. She smiled, her heart full. The world was messy, unpredictable, but it was also beautiful, stitched together by countless acts of humanity. And she'd keep adding her stitches, one step, one trail, one life at a time.